Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Arjun, and the new Superman movie directed by James Gunn is now out in theaters, and this is the start of a new DC universe. There's been a lot of anticipation for this movie throughout the year, and the reviews have been absolutely fantastic. I got a chance to watch it, so in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on the movie. Now, before I tell you guys what I thought about the movie, let me know down in the comments if you got a chance to watch it. Let me know what you thought about the movie and what were your expectations going into it. I would love to know your thoughts. With that said, I'm going to get started talking about my expectations. Since I'm a big superhero movie fan, big DC guy too, I was very excited for this movie. This was naturally one of my most anticipated movies of the year. And I was really excited to see what James Gunn was going to do with the new Superman and with the new DC universe. As we got closer to the movie and we got more trailers, more clips, more interviews and stuff like that, I was a little more cautious. The words I used were I was cautiously optimistic going into the movie. It seemed like the movie had a lot of stuff going on based off of how many trailers we got. The CGI didn't look that great in my opinion. The movie just looked very odd. Because of all these things that I nitpicked in the trailers, I got a little more cautious about the movie. I also want to preface this by saying that I'm a huge fan of Man of Steel and I really like Zack Snyder's iteration of Superman, so I was interested to see how this movie was going to follow that up. But as we got closer to the movie, reviews started coming out, and there's obviously the early screenings that happened 3 or 4 days before the movie came out, and reviews coming out of that were really positive. People seem to be loving it, other than some people here and there. I also rewatched all the Superman movies going into it because I wanted a more fresh perspective, I guess, with the character. With all that said, I know I just yapped a lot. I have to say, I enjoyed the movie. I liked it, but I never really loved it. And I was hoping that I would. I was hoping that, like a lot of people were saying, walking out of this movie, I was like, this is my Superman. I can't wait to see more of this. And I have a little bit of that. I really like this iteration of Superman, but I have a lot of issues with the movie itself. This is a very comic booky and goofy movie, and because of that, it does a lot of things that I think are really cool. It feels like a very lived-in universe with superheroes already there, which the movie explains that superheroes have existed in this universe for like 300 years or something like that, and Superman just happens to be the strongest one of all of them. Because you have a world that has many superheroes, it feels like a lived-in universe already before you even enter it, and I think that's really cool. Because of the way this movie sets up the universe, I'm very excited to see the future of the DC universe. If anything, I'm more excited for the Supergirl movie coming out next year than I was for this movie. And this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, just purely based on the fact that it's a Superman movie. Like I said, I was cautiously optimistic, so I wasn't expecting this to be the greatest thing ever. I was just excited for it. Now, the movie focuses a lot more on Superman than it does on Clark Kent, which I think is fine. I don't think it's that big of a problem. I do wish we got a little more of him being, the journalist, writing papers, stuff like that. But the movie isn't really focused on that, and also a lot of this movie takes place in a pretty short amount of time, so I think it kind of works with what the movie is actually going for. You get a lot more Superman in this movie than I thought you would. Like, from beginning to end, it really is just Superman on screen the whole time. David Cornsweet is fantastic as Superman. I mean, I really don't know what to say because, like I said, I love Henry Cavill's iteration of Superman. To me personally, he's probably still my favorite Superman, but David Cornsweet totally won me over. When I watched this movie and when we got to the end of it, I was like, I cannot wait to see more of him as Superman because he's able to bring like a hopeful and optimistic tone to the character. I think this was a very refreshing take on the character because you get a lot more of that grown-up Boy Scout kind of vibe that you got from Christopher Reeve, but in a different way. And I think that works well here. The movie also talks a lot about how this Superman is very naive and optimistic and kind of just looks for the best in other people as well. And he's just a really good guy. And to a lot of the characters in the movie, he inspires people, he inspires them. And he also just represents hope. You kind of get that in Man of Steel, but they talk about it a lot, about how the symbol of House of L means hope. You get more of it, I think, just visually on screen here. And I appreciate that. I like that a lot because you get a lot of scenes where people are inspired by him, people look up to him, he's saving people. There's so many scenes where he's saving people, which I really like. There's also kind of a deconstruction of the character and kind of the mythology of Krypton. I wasn't the biggest fan of what they do with some of the ideas about Krypton. I wish that was either executed better or just wasn't part of the movie at all. I just wasn't a big fan of it. But I think what it does for the character of Superman worked really well, because you have this guy who's trying his best to help people, to save people. That's really his whole thing. He's just trying to be a good dude. His whole thing is that people were going to die, and I did the right thing by saving people. But there's still people that are arguing about it. Like, to him, it's no question. It's black and white. It's like saving people is the right thing to do. But I think he has this thing about him is like, everything I do is going the wrong way, but why do I still do it? Why am I still being a good person? Why am I still trying to help these people when all they do is turn their backs on me in a way? And I think as someone that has felt that way before, where it's like everything I do goes wrong, I think I kind of saw myself in that character a lot. And I really appreciate that, because I relate a lot to Henry Cavill's Superman as a character. I never really got that from Christopher Reeve as Superman, even though he is seen as like the ideal Superman. I did relate a lot more to Henry Cavill's Superman, and I think I do relate to David Cornsweet's Superman a lot too, because you get a lot more of him as a person, as a human, making mistakes and stuff like that, and how people don't really accept him, even though all he's doing the whole movie is trying to help them. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane is perfect here. I think she is by far the best Lois Lane we have ever gotten. She's beautiful, and also she just does a perfect job of playing the character. She's a great reporter. She has fantastic chemistry with David Cornsweet. I'm not a big fan of a lot of comic book movie relationships, romance, and I think one exception to that has always been Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone as Peter and Gwen Stacy in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I think the second exception to that is going to be Lois and Clark in this movie, because they have fantastic chemistry. They're kind of in a situationship. They're not like full blown in a relationship in this movie. They're in a situationship. They kind of talk about that in the movie too, which I thought was really funny. You can buy their differences. They talk about their differences a lot throughout this movie. And there's one scene between the two of them in Clark's apartment. And you kind of see this in the trailer, where in the background there's like a whole interdimensional being. And the scene is that's probably my favorite scene in the movie. There's a really corny line in that scene too, which I think works really well. There's so much about Lois and Clark in this movie that I absolutely loved, and I can't wait to see them in the future. So I really loved Rachel Brosnahan here too. And then you obviously have to talk about the villain, Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult. Now, when they first announced this casting, I was very weirded out by it, because I've never seen Nicholas Hoult in a role like that. I've never seen him as a villain, and I've never seen him as that kind of character, I guess. Especially because the last thing I saw him was in Nosferatu, and I just didn't think that was gonna work. But he does a great job here. He just hates Superman, and because of just how much he hates the character, he does things in this movie that makes you hate him as the bad guy. You want to see him defeated by the end of the movie. So I think that works really well. I wish we got a little more into his psyche about why he hates Superman and stuff like that. They kind of talk about it. There's a lot of exposition in this movie, and there's dialogue where he's explaining why he doesn't like Superman. But I wish we got to see that rather than him tell us, if that makes sense. I still like him a lot. I think he's probably the best Lex Luthor we've ever gotten to. So in the movies, at least, I haven't seen Smallville. So for me, in the movies, this is pretty easily the best Lex Luthor we've gotten. He's just a really hateable guy. And there's especially a scene in the middle of the movie with him that solidified him as easily my favorite Lex Luthor. There's also a lot of side characters in this movie, but surprisingly enough, I think they all work really well. The movie never feels like it's really stuffed with a lot of characters. The focus is always still on Superman, which I really liked. And the side characters being the Justice Gang, Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, and Mr. Terrific. Green Lantern is Guy Gardner, not Hal Jordan. But anyway, I think all of them work really well. I think they're a really nice little team on the side, and you kind of see how Superman inspires them. And I think they're really cool in that sense. I really like all of them. I especially like Mr. Terrific, which a lot of people are saying he is the standout of the movie in a way, and I think he works really well. I really like him. Also, you got Crypto too, who's just obviously Superman's pet. And I really liked him. There's something they do with him at the end of the movie which kind of annoyed me, but other than that, I think he's just a great dog. He's really cute, and he's also really fun in the action scenes and stuff like that. So I like Crypto a lot too. Two characters that I didn't expect to like as much in this movie were Jimmy Olsen and Eve Tessmacher. Both of them were so good in this movie. They're not in the movie for a lot of the time. They don't get like insane amount of screen time or anything, but I think they both work really well in this movie, especially Jimmy Olsen. I could watch a whole show or movie about Jimmy Olsen because I think what they do with him is a little different. They kind of make him a womanizer, which I think is really funny for the character. He works really well. I really like him. And Eve is great too. She gets a lot more to do in the movie than I thought she would. Ma and Pa Kent are in the movie. They don't get a lot of screen time, but I think the scenes, there's especially one scene with Pa Kent and Clark, which I really liked. But I do wish they got a little more to do in the movie because they have a lot of the emotional through line in the movie, especially when you get to the end of it. There's a lot of emotional moments with them, but I never really felt all of that because you don't get to feel their presence throughout the movie. They're kind of just there for one scene and then you don't see them for the rest of the movie. Now I know I've been gushing about the movie, but like I said, I do have a lot of issues with it. So I'm going to go into some of my negatives here. And a lot of the reason why I didn't feel the emotions for this movie is because I feel like it's very rushed. When people were saying this is like their favorite Superman movie, that it made them feel things, a lot of people teared up and stuff like that. I especially heard a lot of people saying that this movie made them want to feel or want to be a better person. And I felt that in moments. But by the end of the movie, I was more frustrated by the issues I had with the movie than I was inspired by the things that inspired me in the movie, if that makes any sense. I was still inspired by it. I still think there's a lot of fantastic, beautiful moments that I loved and I've been thinking about for the last couple of days since I have seen the movie. But I have a lot of issues with the movie, and I think the pacing is a big reason for that. The movie is just structured really weird. It feels very episodic, where you have a lot of little conflicts going on throughout the movie that kind of lead to the final one. And I heard the movies were supposed to be split into parts. And if that's the case, that makes sense. I can see that. But it's a movie that feels like it's always missing pieces. I feel like I'm not necessarily like I'm lost, but I feel like I'm trying to catch up with the movie. Because the movie starts off in the middle of the story. At least that's how I felt. Because it felt very convoluted and there's like multiple conflicts going on that weren't really introduced. And you're kind of just thrown in there. There's a whole war going on in the movie between two nations, which isn't very explored a lot, especially at the beginning of the movie. And then you're just supposed to be invested in it because the movie tells you to be, which I wish we got more of that. Obviously you have Lex. He works because he's the villain of the movie and you get a lot more of him. But I also think when you're paired with that, and then there's also a whole conflict about the Kryptonian mythology with Superman's biological parents. There's a change made to that. There's a conflict with that, which I think needed a lot more time, honestly, because it's kind of introduced and it's not mentioned again though till like the end, which I thought was really weird. It's like you're introducing something so big, but it's not that big of a deal, at least, big chunk of the movie. And then there's also this whole thing that at the beginning of the movie, it says he lost his first fight, but you never get to see that. And I think that's not very impactful because you're seeing the Superman start off at the bottom. And it's not as impactful when he's at the bottom when you haven't seen him at his peak. I wish you got to see a little bit of that war sequence that everyone's talking about in this movie because he interrupted a war and he saved people's lives. If you got to see that, if you got to see him at the height of his powers where he's saving people and he's doing all that stuff, when you see him on the ground, when he just lost the battle, that's a lot more impactful. So I wish you got to see that. And also, you don't get to see the war. It really is the inciting incident of the movie, is this war where he went and saved a bunch of people that leads to a lot of the conflicts going on here. If we got to see that, I think that would be a lot more impactful and you'd actually care about what's going on in the movie because you don't get to see the inciting incident, which I thought was kind of annoying. And because we're kind of just thrown into the middle of a story, there's so much exposition here. There's so much telling and not enough showing. A lot of the conversations between the villains, especially between Lex and the engineer, and his team, just in general, I found that there's a lot of scenes where they're kind of just telling us a bunch of things that we should know to understand the story. And I found that very annoying because they could have just added a good 20 minutes of runtime to this movie at the beginning and kind of showed us those scenes. I think the movie also is just very rushed because it's trying to juggle so many things, not necessarily with the characters. A lot of people are saying it's overstuffed with characters. I disagree with that. The focus is always on Superman, so I appreciated that. It's stuffed with plot lines. It's stuffed with a lot of things in the story that we're supposed to understand, but we're not really given enough information about. It doesn't feel like natural conversation. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that doesn't feel like natural conversation. I feel like they're talking about things just so the audience understands what's going on. It doesn't feel like real dialogue. It's not a big deal throughout the whole movie. It's just there's specific scenes where that happens, and I found that quite annoying because it's a lot of telling and not enough showing. This movie also kind of deconstructs the Superman character, which in a sense is good, but I feel like the movie tries to respond to a lot of the criticisms that Zack Snyder's movies had, specifically Batman vs. Superman, but the movie does that, but also has a lot of similar issues with a lot similar to Batman vs. Superman. Like, I think this movie is overstuffed with plot lines, just like Batman vs. Superman is. Now, the characterizations of the character are obviously different. He's a lot more hopeful, but there's scenes here too where he's brooding and he's going through a lot of depressing things, and you see him at the bottom. Like I said, there's scenes in this movie where you see him overcome these problems, and it's cool. It's great, but I think it would have been a lot better if we started this movie with the Superman at the height of his power. And then my last major issue with this movie is it's I guess technically two things. It's the CGI and the action sequences. The CGI in this movie, especially as you go into the final battle, everything is very rubbery. The thing I compared it to, the two things I compared it to were the Flash. There's a lot of sequences that look like the final battle of the Flash. Not necessarily as bad as the Flash, but there's pretty weak CGI in there, and I was really annoyed by that. It's similar to when I watched the trailers. A lot of the CGI looks very rubbery and weird. And then my second comparison, especially with the final battle, was there's a fight scene in Matrix Reloaded, the second Matrix movie, a movie that came out 20 years ago. Neo is fighting a bunch of agents, and there's a fight scene at the end of this movie that I thought was very similar because everything looked very rubbery and weird. And in Matrix Reloaded, that fight scene works because, again, that movie came out 20 years ago. But here, when you have similar type of CGI and it's not as realistic looking, it's not as impactful. And I was really annoyed by that, by this whole movie. And the action scenes also don't feel like they have any weight to them. Part of that is because of the CGI, because the CGI it feels very rubbery and weird. It doesn't feel like great CGI. Like when you watch the action scenes in Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Zack Snyder's Justice League, especially Man of Steel, the action scenes are fantastic. The flying sequences are fantastic. They look beautiful. They look stunning. And you feel every punch, especially in Man of Steel. I watched Man of Steel a day before watching this movie, so I don't think that helped with my criticisms of the action scenes, because that movie has easily the best Superman action scenes ever. But also, I think other than the CGI, it also feels like the action scenes have no weight to them because people don't really care. You see people walking around eating ice cream, drinking things, while there's a giant kaiju running around. It's treated like it happens all the time. And because of that, since no one in the movie cares that so many crazy things are happening, it is kind of comic booky. It is kind of cool that it happens all the time here. But at the same time, I think you could make it feel like it has stakes. And then my final this one's a smaller critique, but I really like the score in the movie. The music is fantastic. It takes from John Williams' themes for the original Superman movie, or his score for the original Superman movie, and uses a lot of the same motifs and notes here. And it's great. It works really well. I also really like James Gunn's soundtrack here. My issue is more so a bigger deal than the movie itself. Hans Zimmer had his own original score for Man of Steel. I love the score for Man of Steel. I've always debated if I prefer John Williams' score for Superman or Hans Zimmer's score for Man of Steel, because I think the music in both of those films is absolutely fantastic. The way those themes carry on into the future movies are great. I wish this movie had its own original score. And it does have its own original score. Not all the music in the movie is obviously taken from John Williams' themes. It's just annoying because now Superman is going to, even for this generation, be associated with the John Williams theme. It's going to be the same notes. And when you go on to the future generations of Superman, I feel like they're going to continue reusing that. And then you kind of just have Hans Zimmer's theme for Man of Steel. It feels like an outsider. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Because it kind of feels like they're leaving Man of Steel behind. They're going to pretend like it never happened. And as someone that is a diehard defender of Man of Steel, I think that is the most underrated superhero movie of all time. I don't like that. It's not my specific issue with this movie. It's just Superman as a character as a whole. When you have every other Superman using that score, at least theatrically, I don't know about all the shows, and you have Man of Steel with a different score, there's something about that irks me. I don't like that. With all that said, I did still really like the movie. I know for the last little bit of the review, I did talk about a lot of issues I had, but I still really enjoyed the movie, and I want to rewatch it to make sure that I feel the same way, because I feel like I might like it more on rewatch. Maybe the things I liked will stand out to me more, and the things I disliked won't irk me as much. It's still a movie with a lot of issues, and I tried my best to kind of express that in this review. I know I don't love this movie as much as everyone else seemed to. I really wanted to walk out of this loving it. I still really liked it. I loved the characters. I loved a lot of the things in it. I just didn't love the movie as a whole because I think it has a lot of issues at its core. But I am very excited for the future of the DCU because of this movie. Like I said, I think this movie did a great job of setting up the universe, but I don't think the movie itself is great. For my score, I'm going to go with the 73%. It is not my favorite Superman movie, obviously, but I did like it a lot. Let me know down in the comments, what did you guys think of Superman if you have seen it? If you enjoyed my review, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. I'll also leave links in the description below for my other social media, so go follow me on there. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.